Blog Talk Radio. And welcome everybody to Aquarian Radio. This is an episode of the Cosmic College, and I am your host, Janet Carol Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Lesson. And I am trying to do some things here, and I'm not sure it's working. I think I'm going to call back in. Okay. Thank you. As we work out our technical difficulties, this is the Cosmic College with Dr. Sasha Lesson and Janet Carol Lesson. Welcome to our show. Say hello, Dr. Lesson, to our show, and tell our listeners a little bit about what is the Cosmic College while I make the attempt to get our guests online.
We'd just like to share our reflection. And, reality is an elephant, and we all grab a different part of it. And the more information we share about what we see, the more we learn about the whole elephant. So we want to hear everybody's perspective and share our deepest learning with each other.
All right. As you can hear, we are calling our guest. Our guest today is Steve Omar, and he is a ufologist, researcher, reporter, investigator, and he lives here. Hi, Steve Omar, is that you?
Yes.
Hi, Steve. This is Jan and Sasha. We are on the Cosmic College here on Freedom Talk Radio. And aloha, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today.
Aloha.
Okay. So, unfortunately, last week's show did not record. That's why we're switching to another system on Blog Talk Radio. And so we're going to have to kind of start over. And Dr. Lesson's going to disconnect our phone. Of course, the phone rings. So we have a comedy of errors today, but that's fine. We're going to only do about 20 minutes with Steve. He can't stay with us. He's got other things to do. So away we will go. So the last time, and we'll kind of recap this, and we will go into more details over the course of the next few weeks. But you are one of the main people here that witnessed and documented the UFO activity here in Maui, Hawaii, because you came here. When did you arrive on the island of Maui, Steve?
1967.
I bet it was a very different place there at that time. No Walmarts and Kmarts back then, huh? Sash, what year did you first come to Maui?
62.
62. So I didn't arrive until 97. So I came at a whole different time. And what was going on in terms of the UFO research back in those days, in its infancy?
In the 1960s, Lahaina was full of metaphysical people. I mean, I'm talking about hundreds of them. It seems like most of the people you met were even strangers. And there was big, giant metaphysical gatherings. There was huge meditations, down at the seawall at sunset that hundreds of people came to. And there's nothing like that anymore. It's all gone. And I was over there like right after the Summer of Love, that whole vibration was all over Lahaina, and people began to see UFOs. Wow.
And so, Sash, did you see any UFO activity in the islands? You were here in Oahu. What year did you arrive in the islands?
Well, I arrived in Oahu in 1962. Yeah.
Okay, so you were there at the same time. Yeah. But you came to Maui first. Sash, what year did you come to Maui?
I think I started coming right from the get-go because I was working at in Honolulu at the university. I kept coming over here to Maui to teach Peace Corps. They had Peace Corps training here. And every vacation I got, I was drawn to this island.
Wow. Did you see any UFOs in the early days when you were on Oahu, Sash?
Well, I saw them here by Lahaina, but it was just erratic lights going the way, fishermen's lanterns or airplanes could possibly go, and very distinct. And they were there by a place where you watch the whale. All the way driving from Lahaina to this side, the sky was just alive.
Steve, tell us what you witnessed back in the day.
Well, I'm a specialist in IFOs, identified flying objects. I have no interest whatsoever in unidentified flying objects. There are a dime a dozen. There's millions of them. I think the most spectacular sighting, happened in May 1970 over the Lahaina harbor when a spaceship, and this was not a UFO, it was a metallic spaceship with about 30 rows of portholes in it, with the sun glistening off of it, broad daylight, was hovering over the yacht harbor, and this thing was bigger than a battleship. Some people thought it was bigger than 10 battleships put together. It was so big you could see it from Oahu. There was a photo on the front page of the state newspaper, the Honolulu Star Bulletin, and it sat there for 20 minutes and without moving, and the police saw it. Government officials saw it. The newspapers saw it. It got on the radio, and the Air Force did not deny it. They tried to say it was a guided missile off course from Kauai, but I exposed that myself in the mass media that they were lying about it, because guided missiles don't sit there for 20 minutes. They shoot over at thousands of miles an hour, and they're not bigger than 2 battleships combined, and they don't have rows of portholes in them. And after that, I started seeing stuff myself. There's a lot of UFOs.
Were there any pictures of this identified flying object? Did anybody catch it on film or in photos?
Yeah, it's on the front page of the state newspaper in the headlines.
Wow.
It was also filmed by Warner Brothers. They were filming the Jimi Hendrix movie Rainbow Bridge at the harbor that very day, and they filmed it, and they were going to put it in the movie. But I was told the CIA came to Warner Brothers with guns and everything, and they ripped it off from the director, Chuck Wine. They wouldn't let him put it in the movie.
Wow. So that got taken away from us. But did any of those UFO reports or sightings end up in the Rainbow Bridge production with Jimi Hendrix?
Well, if you look at the original movie, the original one, the one you can buy right now from Rhino Records, that cut out about a third of it, but in the original movie theater version, there was a guy named Dana. No, his name was Dale. Yeah, and he was up in the Owl Valley with 2 other people, and they were talking about how 3 green UFOs came down the Owl Valley. They were talking about people at the Rainbow Bridge Meditation Center up in Olinda that were in contact with ETs and had seen UFOs. And then towards the end of the movie, there were 7 of the stars in the movie hiking out of the crater. They were going up the Switchback Trail, and they saw a silver flying saucer with a dome on it, which followed them up the trail for quite a long time. And then what happened to Warner Brothers guy was on a donkey, and he tried to get off and set up his tripod, and he was so upset about it, he fell off the donkey and he hurt himself, and he was staggering around trying to set up his camera, and by the time he got it set up, the thing shot off over the crater. But I interviewed 3 people on that hike that all agreed it was a silver saucer with a dome on top of it.
So you were documenting this and reporting it, and of course that was a long time ago. Has any of this survived? Do you have copies of these newspapers or any of these things?
Well, the thing is, this was 1970, that was a long time ago, and Leslie Potts, who's one of the leading stars in Rainbow Bridge, and he's also probably the second leading star in my movie, Rainbow Bridge Revisited, which right now is in almost every Walmart. It was released by Multimedia in London, a couple of years ago. Well, we tracked down all the stars that were still alive 40 years later, and we interviewed them about their experiences in the movie. And Leslie Potts, was the one that in my movie, if you want to look at it, describes the ship over Lahaina in great detail. He was right there underneath it. And another guy I interviewed was Mike Henson. He was surfing the Lahaina harbor when that UFO came overhead. He saw it. Another guy in the movie is David Nueva, who was the biggest surfing star in the movie. I talked to him a couple of months ago in California. He saw it. And, Mike Henson and Leslie both saw him up the crater, but Leslie had a copy of that article out of the Honolulu Advertiser with a photo in it, and He showed it to me about 40 years ago, but I don't know if he still has it or not. I'm not really too sure. And all the other stuff was ripped off, I was told, by government agents. You couldn't get away with it back in those days.
Steve, was there any effect besides seeing them? Did they have any effect on the witnesses at all?
On the what?
The witnesses, those who viewed the craft. Were there any effects on the people that witnessed the craft besides seeing it?
Leslie in my movie is talking about how the tourists were panicking, and they thought they were space invaders, and people were freaking out completely. There was a lot of panic going on.
So how does that relate to what's going on now? I mean, what's the attraction for these IFOs, identified flying objects, that they came to Maui, of all places?
Well, back in the 70s, there were so many sightings every day and every night, practically, by thousands of people, that when you went into a restaurant to have lunch or go get a cup of coffee, people talked about them just like they were talking about the movie they saw last night or what they had for dinner. I mean, it was just every day, no big deal conversation. And we saw so many of them. I think the biggest one that I saw was like we had a meeting where Leslie was lecturing. It was in a big house on Front Street, 1972. It was packed. We had a big crowd, and they came right overhead, and we all ran outside and looked at them hovering overhead. They flew off down Restaurant Row at low altitude, and they were golden glowing. And everybody saw them at all the restaurants. I talked to many waiters, bartenders, waitresses. I saw them, tourists saw them. And my father, who was a complete skeptic, had gone to dinner in an Ocean House restaurant on Front Street, and he saw them. He came home completely convinced they're real. And but what happens, like nowadays, we've been told there's just as many that are still on Maui because it's a vortex, and there's also an intergalactic space base below Haleakala. They come to that. But back in those days, the government couldn't do anything about them. And now they have sophisticated beam weapons that can shoot down flying saucers. And they've shot down quite a few of them, including the whistleblowers from Area 51 and Dulce and places like that. And so right now they cloak. I mean, there could be like 100 of them up in the crater right now, but you couldn't see them because they're invisible. But you could walk up and bang on them. I mean, there's been cases of people that are walking along, they walk into a flying saucer and just crash their body into it, and they can't see it. It's just sitting there on the ground.
That's very interesting because we were interviewing some people about Valiant Thor, and they say that his craft is up in, where is he, up in one of the lakes, Lake Tahoe, just parked beside the lake, and you can't see it, but some people do run into it. So the same phenomena is happening here in Maui, and I think you hit on a key point. The reason for all this UFO activity is that this is a portal, an interdimensional portal, and probably a stargate for the craft to travel from here to where they need to go. Plus, you indicated that there's a UFO base now under Haleakala, and there's also one up here that you come in through Iki Crater. Are these extraterrestrial? Are these U.S. military or world military, or is it a combination? What have you uncovered about these underground bases?
All the information we have from witnesses is the one below the crater and the one below Iki Crater are strictly intergalactic. There's no military involvement at all. In fact, the guy from Pearl Harbor that was telling me all about these bases back in 1972, Sergeant Willard Winnell from Army Intelligence, said the government was trying to find out what was inside them. They knew they were down there, but they'd never been inside. And my witness, Dale was the only guy that they knew of that had ever been down there, that lived to tell about and came back out without getting abducted or disappearing. And he told all about it. And but there is another base off Kauai, which is underwater, and I've talked to Hawaiians that camp out there. Native Hawaiian sovereignty people have a camp out there, and they say they see them coming out of the water, and they fly overhead frequently. And that I was told by a guy from Naval Intelligence, Commander Mark Huber, that that's a gray base, and that the military involvement with ETs is at Barking Sands base on Kauai. It's a missile base, but they also have underground joint ET bases down below Barking Sands on Kauai.
So the extraterrestrials are here, and you're saying that they there's a strong gray contingent, but are there other extraterrestrial beings that you are aware of that are living here in the islands? Or have bases on the
ones
islands?
were the crater, according to the man that told me he'd been down there, which was the guy from Pearl Harbor. I thought this guy was totally telling the truth, but he said that they were from 16 different planets in the Galactic Confederation, and the group that he talked to is based underground on Venus, and the Venusians have been very active on Maui since the 60s, and back in the 70s they were. There was a lot of Venusian activity on the island. I don't have time to talk about it right now, but we've actually met a Venusian pilot whose ship was stationed over Haleakala in 1972 and seen by astronomers up there that came to my office and told me about it. And we introduced this person to the United Nations. The person in charge of the UFO investigation for the United Nations have validated it was a Venusian pilot. But basically, these are peaceful. And the thing I want to really emphasize about Maui is I've been collecting reports since 1969, and I don't have one single report of a negative, painful abduction over here. I don't have any cattle mutilation reports. I don't have any reptilian reports or any negative graves or any of this weird stuff you hear about on the mainland. Every contact we've had here in my files has been totally positive.
Steve, what did you hear about how the Venusian fleet is organized? Like, some of our informants say that a fellow named Valiant Thor and his second in command is this beautiful woman. They were actually photographed with Dr. Strange, I guess it was their Stranges. They look like us, except their skin is perfect, and etc. So I want to know what you found out about them, their flight, and all the different fleets. I mean, not flight.
Well, Dr. Strange, I interviewed him personally. In fact, he was in charge of my organization, the Department of Planetary Affairs for the state of California back in the 70s. And I've been to his house. He showed me the big color photos of Venusians and their craft. And he told me that 77 Venusians were dropped off in the 50s, to monitor Earth, to bring teachings of certain select people. And one of them was the one that was on Maui in 1972. And this person I talked to, they all dress up like humans. Like if you look at Valiant Thor and Dr. Strange, he's a book stranger in the Pentagon. He's wearing a suit and tie and he's disguised. Well, the one that winged that had an Aloha shirt on and a pair of white slacks, and he had shoulder-length blonde hair, and he had extremely crystal clear blue eyes, perfect skin. He was extremely good-looking. He looked like he might have been in his low 20s, but they could have been 800 for all we know. And this person was able to take myself and two of my assistants, Paul Groover and Nick Cole, out at night to Burger King when there was nobody there in Lahaina, maybe about 1 o'clock at night, and point overhead to a UFO that was hovering directly overhead and said that was his ship and he was the pilot. And another time we had a meeting in the Pili with the Secretary of the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Freddie Isco, who was in charge of the United Nations UFO investigation, and this pilot walked into the room. And there was about 13 people in there. We all looked out the window, and there was a UFO hovering directly out the window. And he very calmly said, "That's my craft." And they're monitoring the meeting. And whether this person was really a Venusian or not is controversial, but the person in charge of the United Nations UFO investigation said it was a Venusian. And this person, Farida Iskil, that was the second most powerful person in the General Assembly of the United Nations at that point in time, and this, assistant to the president himself, not a Malik, and who I was supplying information for. I was investigating UFOs for the president of the United Nations, and also meeting this pilot was Major Wayne Asaho, that investigated UFOs for the Pentagon for Army intelligence, and he was the guy that reverse engineered the Roswell crash with Lieutenant Philip Corso. He was Corso's assistant in reverse engineering. He met this guy, too, and said he was a Venusian pilot, so it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. They're here to help us, and boy, do we ever need help.
Well, this correlates with another witness that I'm interviewing, and I'm not at liberty to say her name yet, but there was a ceremony here in 1950 with Valiant Thor. It was like a wedding ceremony. Have you heard about that or have any witnesses to that event?
The only thing I know about Valiant Thor, I had a chance to meet Valiant Thor. In fact, Dr. Strange wanted me and the United Nations leader to go out there. He was going to drive us out there and take us to the ship so we could go on board. And I couldn't go because I had a really important appointment in Honolulu I had to go to. And so, Frida took off. And, Frida vanished off the face of the earth. We don't know whatever happened. I was in weekly contact with this United Nations leader. Frida was the second most powerful person in the United Nations. And just vanished off the face of the earth. Yeah, we don't know. Then Frida was no longer in the United Nations. And we were trying to figure out if she got killed by the CIA or if she got taken by Valiant Thor in the spaceship because we never heard from Frida ever again. Frida was in constant weekly contact with us.
Let's slow this down. Yeah. When did you last hear from Frida? What year? Do you know what was going on?
Well, we were at Frank Strange's house in 1974, and then Frida took off to meet Valiant Thor. And like I said, Frida became a great friend of mine, and we were in weekly contact. I never heard from Frida ever again, and Frida disappeared from the United Nations pretty quickly. And another thing that happened to Michael Heberger, who's in charge of our Department of Interplanetary Affairs for the state of California right now. After Dr. Strange died, Michael took over. He said he met Valiant Thor in the Los Angeles International Airport a few years ago and talked to him.
Okay, so let me slow this down for our listeners. And just to kind of summarize this. So, Valiant Thor was a fellow that came to. Just give a brief synopsis of that story. No, we don't have it. Yeah, he landed on the highway in Virginia, right outside of Washington D.C. What year was that? Tell us the story real quickly here.
50s.
Yeah, it was in the late 50s.
57 or 58 or sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 57, and he had 3 years. He was a guest at the Pentagon.
First he went to the White House, and he met President Eisenhower
and Nixon
and Vice President Nixon for a couple of hours, and then he was a guest of the United States in the Pentagon, and he let himself answer questions and be available for 3 years.
Right, and they even though they handcuffed him, it was just a joke because he could just move his hands and they'd fall off. And then they had something about his suit. They tried to, they wanted proof, okay, because he looked human. These people who live in the underground at Venus, and people go, well, you can't have life on Venus. No, it can be underground. They're underground, and they live there, and they look human. But the way he proved it was that he had an outfit that would resist nickel acid and gunshots, and so the officers that tested the outfit said, okay, this is beyond our technology. I believe you. So, Tosh, can you disconnect it? I thought you disconnected it. And so, anyway, that's just to catch up our listeners. So this whole Valiant Thor mystery has a Maui connection through various sources. And so you have this pilot that you personally met and had a long conversation with and interaction with. So how did the pilot, did he have a name that he gave you?
Well, he told me I couldn't reveal his name to anybody without his permission, especially not on the radio. But when he was around me and people wanted to know who he was, he just called himself Rick, but that he wouldn't tell
Rick.
people his real name or anything. And like I said, he came to that giant packed meeting where we saw the UFOs, overhead, and he didn't tell anybody who he was. And he was sitting there monitoring the meeting. There were people sitting right next to him who had no idea who he was. I only knew about maybe 10 people that knew who he was. Yeah.
So when he would show up in a meeting, he would just simply point out the window and say, well, where's my craft? So when he was
I'll tell you a funny
showing
story.
The craft,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you a funny story about being incognito. My dad was a skeptic. He was staying in my apartment, and he thought he came in there, and the Venusian was sitting on a couch right next to me and Leslie Potts, and my dad sat down right next to him, not even knowing who he was. And we invited my father to the meeting. And he didn't want to go. He said, "Well, I think you guys are smoking a bunch of pot. Like you're all tripped out. I don't believe you're hallucinating. You're seeing UFOs." And he didn't want to go. And so he looked at the He asked me what we were going to talk about. And we said we were going to talk about Venusians. So my dad looked at the Venusian, and he goes, "Do you believe in Venusians?" And the Venusian just smiled and said yes. He didn't say anything else. And then my dad said, "Well, I think you've been dropping too much acid, smoking a bunch of pot." And he went storming out of the room and went to dinner.
Hey, Dad.
and then my dad saw the UFOs flying past the restaurant, and then he came back and he goes, "I'm a believer. I saw him."
Wow. So did your Venusian pilot Rick have fingerprints? I don't know if anybody, you'd have to really look close at somebody's hands, but that was one of the things they were saying, is that the Venusians do not have fingerprints like humans do.
Yeah, I never looked at his fingers. I hadn't read Strangey's book at the point I met him. This was 2 years before I read the book and I met Dr. Strangey's. And I don't really know, but all I know is no matter what was happening, this person was always just smiling, really happy and bubbly, and friendly. It seemed like nothing bothered him.
So he had a different energy. A lot of people, they look just like humans, but there's something energetically that's different about them, like the extreme beauty. So they say, "Oh wow, they look like angels. They're so beautiful. They're beyond normal beauty." So anyway, I was just wondering, did you notice anything besides his beauty that would tell you, like, you might think, wow, this person is quite human?
I think it was his voice and his aura. You could really feel his aura. It's just overwhelming love, And but our department contacted a Venusian woman who was one of the 77, apparently, named Onek, back in 1990. And Onek briefed me on a lecture I gave up at the Future Aid Center in the Al Valley I gave a lecture on Venus one night, but Onek was dropped off in the Mojave Desert in 1955 by a spacecraft from Venus, and Onek said that when she grew up on Venus, she went to the Universal College of Higher Learning there and majored in Earth. And she gave me a book. I was told there's only 100 copies of it on the whole planet, and it's a book about how she grew up on Venus and studied Earth and what a shock it was for her to come here. And right now she's in Germany, but that's a whole different story that would take a long time to tell.
Well, we're gonna give little teasers to our listening audience, and then we will flesh out each of these episodes at greater length in the future. So I know we're running out of time. Do you want to tell our listeners some of the things we're going to cover over the next few weeks before you have to go here?
Well, I can do a whole thing on the Venusian Onek sometime. I've never done it on radio or TV before. And, in fact, I want to tell you, your show is the first show I've ever talked about this Venusian. I've never done it before on tons of radio shows. It's just, this is exclusive. It's just something that's so far out that I was afraid I was going to damage my credibility. But it was verified by the United Nations and Major Aho. And also, Sergeant Willard Winnell from Army Intelligence was pretty impressed, too. But anyhow, basically, the Venusian Onek, was interviewed by Captain Mark Hoover, who used to investigate UFOs for the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he flew spy planes over the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And he was on Maui for a while. In fact, he showed me 7 UFOs up in the Al Valley. up in the crater, up in the crater, in broad daylight one day. 7, glistening UFOs. But he met Onek and verified it. But I also like to talk about the Venusian economy and the Palladian economy and how they barter and they don't use money like we do here, and how we need to get into barter. That's probably the most important thing we can be doing right now, according to the Galactic Confederation, is start trading and bartering, because they've warned us the whole economy is going to totally crash in the near future.
Right. So we're going to talk about that. And we're actually going to put this information up on our, we'll have a link on aquarianradio.com. That's our major site where we record, or we document and have links for all our various shows. And, Steve, I would like to have you report on extraterrestrialcontact.com, because that's our main ET site that we document all these sightings and people that are whistleblowers and people that are... this is very brave to come out, and I think things are in place in the universe and the consciousness that we can at last say these things, because 20 years ago you couldn't say these things without risking life and limb, so to speak. So now... we are talking about it, and we will talk about why we can talk about it. That's another thing we can cover in a future show. So we're going to talk about the bartering system that's coming down the line, a new paradigm for people to start sharing with each other in their own backyards, in their neighborhoods, because if there's a global collapse, you're going to need to eat. So,
and by the way, Shirley, before the show, I sent you a new email on the barter thing for the Maui Moon installment. You've got a new installment with all the. I sent the departments in last night, but today I sent some more updates on survival.
All right, so we're working on a new website for that, and when we get that, we'll announce that. And Dr. Lesson, any final words? Well, anyway, you can go, Steve. I know you have another appointment, and I promise not to keep you. So any final words for our listeners, and then Dr. Lesson and I will close the show.
Yeah, join the Maui Barter Network if you live on Maui. And if you live on the mainland United States, I would suggest getting into bartering pretty quickly because right now there's even conservative Republicans defecting from Congress, saying it's going to crash in October and there's nothing they can do about it. And when these guys are worried about it, it's serious.
Yeah, they even gave it a date, like, October 7th, that there's going to be a crash. And so it's really interesting when people stand behind a specific date. Either they're trying to create another false flag that day, or they know something that we don't.
Well, you always before it was the psychics and channelers, and fear-mongers, but now it's the conservative Republicans and the Democrats both warning us, so we should take it seriously.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve Omar, for joining us today, and we'll look for you again this time next week. Aloha. Anything you want to say, Sash?
I know that
thank you.
Listeners have been... Go ahead. Let's be silent.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead. Any final words?
Thank you, and aloha. See you next Friday in aloha and start bartering.
Okay, then. We'll see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to talk to you. Touched off by what you heard. Now, you may have had experiences, and you may have dismissed them or not wanted to talk about them for fear of ridicule. But I can tell you, I've immersed myself in this literature. We have definitely been visited by extraterrestrials from the get-go, from the beginning of our species here 450,000 years ago. And there's a huge modern contact that's being taking place and is being hidden by the truth embargo. And so that when Steve is telling his story, just remember, you may have a story in there too. You may start to remember what happened in your dreams.
Yeah, we have another experience. They're called experiencers, people that witness otherworldly things, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals. Next week, I'm working on another experiencer coming on to our show. I won't reveal his name yet until he actually shows up. But he was going to be here today, but he just couldn't get it to work on his end. So we're working on it for next week. But I have an experiencer, and they used to be called abductees. I don't consider myself a victim. I realized after much introspection and some therapy and counseling, some hypnosis, going into this phenomenon that I experienced the entire time I've been alive, and that I've never been a victim, that this was an agreement that I had with the extraterrestrials before I came into physical form, before I incarnated as a human being. And my agreement is to be a part of this ascension age, is what we were labeling it, but it's basically a time of consciousness and becoming awake and aware of our existence beyond 3D reality, beyond our five senses. And that involves a lot of personal work, because you're up against society, which is a self-policing society, and it wants to stifle the truth and the information and call you crazy. And there's a part of you that isn't strong enough to say, okay, I'm not crazy. But the more you phenomenon about the experiencers, then the more you realize that nothing in the what was it? Nothing in the I forget to say.
Nothing in the human condition is alien to any of us.
That's right. Goethe says nothing in the human condition is alien to any of us. So the more you think you're alone, realistically, or the truth is, there are many people having your experiences, and you don't want to say things to the wrong people where you're getting a clobbered. So if you want to come on this show, we have on aquarianradio.com, it says be a guest, and you can send me a confidential note via the website, and I will talk to you privately, and then we'll decide if you want to come on. If you want to come on, we can have you come on, and you can use an alias. You don't have to use your own name.
It isn't just about extraterrestrial phenomena. We're interested in past lives, in the archetypal messages, the memes that are coming through to you and that you're giving energy to with your own thoughts. You know, and even the thing you make up. Where's up that you're making it from? And your daydreams, not just your. These are all parts of you or resonating aspects within you that the universe is awakening. Your genes are awakening, and the genes are going to cascade now into the possibility of way, way more broad consciousness that's empathetic for all the other consciousnesses that are around. Because that's what we need on this planet. We need to realize our oneness with all other beings.
And we need to realize that because there's so many people that are suffering. There are people who are in deep struggle economically, physically, with their health. And all these issues, there are cures for these issues. For longevity, our life expectancy has been shortened. And we were given 120 years. Well, I don't know hardly anybody that lives 120 years. Most people are dying before 80. A lot of people before 70. I just lost a couple of friends. They were in their 60s. So people are dying because of cancers and diseases, and these things are curable. So the benefit of this discussion and being open is that we're working towards a paradigm where we are honored and our consciousness is respected. That's what I'm trying to say.
So one of the deals that I think it was offered to Eisenhower by some of the extraterrestrials was that the extraterrestrials would provide a cure to our medical ails, that we would be healthy and we would live longer. And the deal was he would have to give up the atomic armament and the arms race. And he was afraid to do that, partly because of the Soviet threat. But with much more than that, he realized if he stopped the health industry and doctors and pharmaceuticals, that he would not be able that he wouldn't be able to govern. That these were the people that really controlled things in America. And so Valiant Thor had offered this exchange: give up your nukes, give up your medical establishment and the pharmaceuticals, and we'll give you long life and health. And I had to turn it down, but in his sadness, he told the nation, watch out for the military-industrial complex. He blew the whistle.
Great. And we are very thankful that he did do that. He left us a warning, and some people are paying attention. It's many years later, 50, 60 years later, we're finally looking at the things that our leaders had said before about what was going on, and we're piecing together all the tiny pieces of this elaborate puzzle. And the reason why it's not so clear is because of the disinformation and the government cover-up that has been going on since, Roswell is the modern era, but it's been going on since the get-go.
Truth embargo.
The truth embargo.
And the idea to discredit and, in the old days, even kill. And Steve Omar, I'll tell you about some of his friends that would kill those who are telling the truth that the secret covert government doesn't want out.
So I think that's about it for today. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners, Sasha, Dr. Lisson, before we sign off?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it was a very interesting interview by Alfred Weber of Lorraine Moray, who said that the missing Malaysia Flight 370 was actually brought down as part of the Navy sonar weapon, and it was partly to show Putin that the U.S. Navy had this great force now and goes on and on and on. I have no idea how accurate any of this is, but what it does is it makes me think about how little I trust the events to really be what they seem on the surface, and how I'm always nowadays looking for what's really going on behind the curtain.
Well, that whole flight, the 370, Malaysia Flight 370, is shrouded in controversy. The cell phones kept ringing for days after the plane was supposedly blown up, and that was after the point it disappeared, there was still a signal coming from the transponder. What I found most interesting is there was a satellite, or not a satellite, we call it radar overview of the entire area, all the planes in the area, and it shows very clearly from the lower right-hand corner this large circle, round phenomena enters into the radar screen, and there's planes all over the place. They're coming and going, landing, coming and going all through that area. And it shapeshifts into a plane, and it resembles a plane, and then it takes off, and it's going 5 times the speed of any other surrounding planes in the area, which is probably covering a couple 100-mile radius. And then it goes up to the right top of the screen, and it just hovers there. It's stalled. It's not moving anywhere. It's just hovering there. And then you very clearly see Flight 370 taking off from Malaysia, and it goes out until it's about equidistant to the left-hand side of this stalled craft, which is probably hundreds of miles away, but in the screen it's just all on one on the radar screen. You can fit it all on one screen of your computer. And then it disappears. When it gets to the same point to the left of this phenomena, it starts doing this little thing where it starts to turn, and then it disappears. So part of the speculation was, was that an abduction? Was that a huge abduction of 300 people or whatever it was, 230 people? So it's interesting to see what people come up with. So we've been tracking these. There's something very unusual about this phenomenon. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, it's very, very interesting because we have ambiguous stimuli, and people are projecting their different stuff on it. So if you're into the conspiracy stuff, you see it as a conspiracy. If you're really into UFOs, you see this UFOs. And thought in psychology we had these ambiguous ink blot tests and something else where you see these pictures called thematic perception test. But the ink blots, the story is that the psychiatrist is showing somebody all these ink blots, and shows them one ink blot, and that's a penis. Well, that's a vagina. It goes on and on. And all these ink blots, this could be anything. The patient keeps saying sexual parts. And so after a while, the psychiatrist said, you seem to be really interested in sex. And the patient said, no, it's not me. Just keep showing me all these dirty pictures, Doc.
Har. Right. So that's cute. Anyway, so we have this phenomenon, and I wanted to say to our listeners that a few days before that, there was a large cigar-shaped over the Ukraine right when Russia was making its excursion into that area. And the story was Putin's men saw it, and they called them, and they ran the other way, and they weren't going to address this cigar-shaped UFO. And it's on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there because they're starting to pull things, but it was up for a few days. And you can go into YouTube and search for the Ukraine cigar-shaped ship, size of 3 aircraft carriers, and they have it right over the city, broad daylight. There it is. And the story was, there were 2 stories. One, of course, was that it was extraterrestrial craft and that they're coming down here because this is the time where everybody's looking for the event that's going to create the Great Awakening, which is going to create the ascension for all humanity. We're going to finally come into this golden age. And I hope it lasts more than 1,000 years. I'd like it to last, 100,000 years. I'm tired, bored of these wars. But one faction said that this was a U.S. craft, and that it basically, they had a name for it. I'm sorry, I forget it right now. I needed to print this out. But that it was a game changer. That it can it has stealth technology. It can cloak itself. It can track anything that's coming to destroy it. It can block communications. And so who knows? There seems to be some correlation between this Flight 370 and this Ukraine craft. So if you out there, listeners, have any ideas on what was going on, I'd like to hear from you. So please write to us at aquarianradio.com, and that's AQUARIAN radio, RADIO, at gmail.com. And I'd like to hear your theories. I'm thinking of doing an article and doing a post on my blogs here on this phenomenon, because it's interesting. We have the phenomenon, which is interesting in itself, but now we have, like Dr. Lesson was saying, the perception. Depending on your worldview, where do you put these things that are happening in this very strange world we have now?
Is it an angel? Is it a devil? Is it an ET? Is it our government? Is it LSD? Who knows? Yeah,
if you smoke too much Pakalolo.
Actually, if you see something when you smoke Pakalolo and then you forget about it, the way you can remember it again is smoke some more.
So anyway,
state-specific memory, it's called.
Yeah. So we don't know what's going on. I claim about the answer. I invite you to, view everything with a grain of salt. Although I do not want to get into arguments and debates about my God's better than everybody. Hi, everybody. Sorry we got disconnected. Don't know why, but anyway, here we are back. I guess the powers that be didn't like what I'm saying. Or maybe I pressed a wire, so who knows. But go ahead. What were we saying? Okay, we were talking about perspective, the worldview, and anything. We're almost out of time. We got just a few more minutes. Dr. Lesson, do you have any final words for our listeners?
Just seize your uncertain times, and then life is finite in this particular earth walk, and like we still come to an end. And so you've got it's really interesting. Definitively, do now's the time to do it. Now's the time to do it. Don't wait for some other time. Live now. Carpe diem. Enjoy yourself. The day be your last, and if it ain't, and you had fun anyway, you're not lost. If we all go down, let's say the world's going to end terribly and we're all going to die. If we worry about it between now and that time, then we spend less of our time worrying about it. If we just enjoy ourselves, when we die, we'll be dead. We don't have anything to worry about. When we're alive, we don't have to worry either. So don't worry.
Don't worry. Be happy. Well, it appears that no matter what happens to us, we are, and consciousness is, and we are somewhere. In fact, part of the theory is that we are several whereas at one place. We are multidimensional beings having simultaneous existences in many realms and planets and spheres of existence. So if we're blipping out of this reality, the Earth plane, that there are places for us to incarnate and have life experiences all over the galaxy, if not the universe. So that's the theory of everything.
And your dogs and cats wait for you in the interlife, being cared for by people every deceased you that love animals.
So with that all being said and done, there is the benefit of being here in the moment, and we are co-creators with Source, and that we're not victim, and we can empower ourselves by getting around a reality, a paradigm which honors consciousness and all life and respects the planet and all the creatures and features, and allows us to have the highest quality life possible in each moment. So that's what we're going to get our heads around, perhaps this other financial system, because what we're realizing with our investigation is one of the leading systems that keeps us enslaved is the current financial economic system. And we need another paradigm. And so maybe the collapse will or won't happen. I don't know. I think there's too many people invested at the top that like to lord over us that will not allow this whole collapse. They might collapse in areas, but they'll shift the power and then they'll continue the game. And if we take control of the game and say, well, we're not going to play, we're not going to participate, we're going to have our own system of exchange, we might be able to get a little bit better in this this trauma. You have one thing to say, honey. Go ahead.
We're gonna don't do nothing.
Huh?
We're gonna this and we're gonna that don't mean nothing.
We're gonna. Well, all I'm getting is that, excuse me, unless there's a new idea, new concepts to wrap,
new behavior, Jen.
new behaviors, things that we can wrap our minds around and get behind, then we're still in the matrix, in this limited box that doesn't allow us any